Good day and welcome to the WCAT studios here. My name is Steve May, your town administrator, and today we're going to talk about recreational marijuana. As you may know, there is a question on our town election ballot. It's question 1. It's the only question, where we are hoping that you will vote yes to authorize town meeting to actually put into place zoning and general bylaw laws to make sure that recreational marijuana facilities do not show up in Wakefield. So we're going to talk a little bit about marijuana, and with me is our police chief, Chief Smith, our superintendent of schools, Dr. Kim Smith, and Catherine Dingra, who is our substance abuse prevention officer in town, and also very active, as are all of us here with the Wakefield United Prevention Coalition. So Catherine, you probably know more about marijuana than anybody else here. Maybe, huh?
Probably.
So I thought we'd talk to you about a little bit about why is this important to the town of Wakefield?
All right, so we are fortunate that we have a dedicated substance abuse prevention coalition. Amongst all of you, we're founding members of the coalition, and we have a great partnership focused on reducing youth substance abuse in the community. And we've done a lot of successful initiatives around that, and we've brought some of our rates down, but we're really concerned about marijuana use in Wakefield across the country, because marijuana use is often one of those drugs that youth consume first. It might be cigarettes and vapes, and then it moves on to marijuana. So we are looking at this, and nationwide we've seen rates of marijuana use go down in the 1990s and then start to go up again in around 2007, and we've seen that parallel here in Wakefield. And one of the things that we've seen is when youth perceive something to be less risky, their rates go up, and we've seen that happen in Wakefield. We've seen youth, back in 2011, about 90% saw regular marijuana use as risky, and that's gone down to around 50%. So we're really concerned about that, because youth are not seeing it as risky, and we're reporting both through the Youth Risk Behavior Survey and through anecdotal data that, marijuana use is not so risky, and we're seeing increased use, more use using regularly, and we're really concerned about that. So we're looking at some of the data and figuring out how can we show youth that marijuana use is in fact risky. Marijuana is totally different from the marijuana in the 70s and 80s. The THC content back in the 70s was around 1.3%. So back in the 80s and 90s, when a lot of the parents of today's teens were in college, that rate was still around 3 or 4%. So today, the average THC content is around 15%. So I almost say that's a completely different drug when you're looking at THC content. And then when you get to the edibles and some of the things that the youth are using now, and I'm just going to show you some of the products that are more likely. Typically, adults think of a rolled joint of marijuana, but today the products are looking a little differently. And these are products that were recently samples, not the real thing.
Okay.
Confiscated in places like Wakefield High School and other surrounding high schools. We're hearing a lot about edibles. So edible gummy bears, so the THC content in edibles can be up to 50 to 60% THC. So when we're thinking of a joint back in the 80s or 90s being 3%, 4% THC to a couple of marijuana edibles being a higher concentration, we're really talking about what is that doing to the young person? What is that doing to their brain, to their brain development? So it's really talking about a different drug than a lot of people have in their mind. And the edibles.
Yeah. Now, you started your conversation by saying that a lot of the young people don't believe that marijuana is risky. I'm going to ask the police chief, is marijuana risky? Most certainly is. We've had many conversations, so please share that a little bit.
Let me go to Colorado. Let's start there, since it was the second state in the country to legalize marijuana. And I'll get back to another issue, but it's proven in Colorado that use of marijuana, legalization of marijuana, has driven the opiate trade. And what has happened is that opiate addiction death rates in Colorado in the last 3 years have doubled ever since they've started to legalize marijuana. And as Catherine said, when it's legalized, even the juveniles, even those under 21, perceive it as legal for them, even though the state of Massachusetts says that under 21, it's a no-go. That means nothing. It means nothing on the black market. What we've found historically from California, Colorado, and Washington State is that the black market is driven even more now that marijuana is legal. They just undercut it. There's so much of it out there. There's so much in trafficking in marijuana right now. There's so much money. This is all about money. Our perspective is it's all about our kids and the society and the communities that we live, work, and serve. It's not money to us. Unfortunately, people say, well, alcohol is legal. Why not marijuana? We have been unable to get our arms around alcohol since the days of Prohibition. Why do we want to double that?
Yeah, why do we want to add another item?
Exactly.
Talk a little bit about what the neighborhoods are like around marijuana establishments in Colorado, because you and I have had discussions about that.
Not only have we had discussions about that, I've actually witnessed it. And a recent trip to Denver on business, first of all, there's more marijuana shops in Denver than there are McDonald's. So that kind of tells you something about it. But the people a lot of people are drawn to this type of environment. There's a lot of homeless. There's a lot of juveniles who are runaways. It becomes a mecca for runaways. With that comes all the problems that you have with runaways and juveniles that are runaways. You have the homelessness, you have the drugs, you have the promiscuous behavior, you have the stealing, you have the street petty crimes. And around those pot shops, that's what they're finding out there is a spike. They're usually not in good neighborhoods, but nonetheless, the neighborhood that they go into gets driven down by that element. Don't forget that this is a place for petty criminals to prey on people also. There's a lot of money being transacted, and most of it's a cash business. So with that comes the problems that come with that type of transaction.
Interesting. Dr. Smith, we talked a lot about the, I know, great conversation to talk about, right? We talked a lot about the youth and their, the lack of risk in their mind with marijuana. And I know the school department's been great about doing surveys and looking at that and working together with the community. How do you see this affecting our students, our society-wise and educationally?
Well, I have a lot of the thoughts, and the reason I started with a sigh is because I'm just thinking about marijuana shops and how important it is as an educator to keep marijuana at a distance from young people for some of the reasons that you just talked about. But I think about the long-term effects of marijuana on young people, on teens. Teenagers are by nature and by physical development and brain development short-term thinkers. They don't think a lot about consequences. Their frontal lobe is still really developing through their mid-20s. So they tend to engage in some risky behaviors or maybe have a perception that the risk isn't that bad. But some of their short-term thinking doesn't match the long-term effects of marijuana. So, I was looking up before we came today on a specific study that targeted something that I knew about, but I wanted to make sure I had the actual data. And in that study, it showed and demonstrated that the long-term regular use of marijuana beginning in the teen years may impair brain development and lower IQ. In this particular study, it lowered IQ by something like 6 or 8 points. Maybe, Catherine, you know that study. Meaning that the brain may never reach its full potential, which is when you really think about that as an educator, of course, that's really concerning. And young people, again, think short term, I'm going to smoke and have a little fun with my friends, but what they don't realize is that the effects linger, sometimes for days, and it can affect their learning, their memory, their judgment, their coordination, their balance, lots of different things that can just impact their day-to-day functioning. So as an educator, I'm very concerned about what these long-term effects are and the access of marijuana and what that could mean for kids. And one thing I was just thinking about when you were holding up the gummy bears, I'm remembering you telling me that when kids eat the edibles, that sometimes they don't feel the effect right away, and it's got that large concentration, and so they're thinking, oh, I'm not really feeling anything, I'm going to have more. Maybe you could elaborate on that a little bit, but...
Yes, it's different because it goes into their stomach and then it takes a while to get absorbed into the bloodstream. So a lot of times that's what happens, and that's why a lot of the hospitalizations have occurred out in Colorado, and because people take more because they're not feeling the effect, and then it's, you know, that high THC content, it's wham, and the psychoactive, you know, it can just cause people to be very sick and very ill.
Another piece of that too, Catherine, is there's no dosage unit. There's no set dosage unit. If you go into a pharmacy and you buy X pill, there's a dosage unit. You know what's in that pill that you're going to take, whatever it is. In the edibles, we have no idea what the dosage unit of THC is in there. So
and a lot of times the dosage is a half a square of chocolate, and I don't know anyone that thinks that's, you know, they're like, oh, I'm supposed to take a half of this. Well, if they're going to get it in a bag, it's not marked, and so they might say, I'll take 1 square or 2 squares, not knowing. So, you know, that's the thing, is that with the medical marijuana and the recent, you know, the devices have changed, and the other thing that's becoming very popular are these vaping devices, which youth are using for, you know, vaping nicotine, but they're also being used to vape THC. That's something very common that we're seeing, and it's just something for people to be aware of, where, you know, you might not smell the same smells, and it might look a little different, and it's not that heavy smoke. So it's not burning, it's just a different, they're using it in a completely different way. So it's just something for us to be aware of. And those are the products that are going to be available in the stores when the retail shops open up.
You know, in Massachusetts, Chief, there are very strict laws regarding alcohol and levels of alcohol in your body before you can drive a car. How does that translate to marijuana, or does it?
Actually, it's a very good question, and it is problematic for operating under the influence of drugs. Right now, there's no field sobriety tests out there for us, and there's no measured BAT or breath alcohol device out there. Right now they're talking about, I think it's 4 nanograms, but there's no per se law, there's no implied consent for marijuana. So for us, dealing with an impaired operator under marijuana is going to be very, very difficult in the state to prove in a court of law. And the other piece of it is how long does the marijuana stay in your body? And that's going to be the big defense argument. Oh, my client smoked 4 days ago. Therefore, yada, yada, yada. So, I mean, what we foresee from law enforcement perspective is the danger in driving under the influence of drugs right now. There's no way we can enforce it, but where are we going to end up at the end of the day? We can get the impaired driving, but we're not going to have the chemical analysis. We're not going to have the legal threshold that other states have in Massachusetts. So what does that turn into? It turns into people who are driving under the influence probably getting off in court. There's no sanction. There's no referral to any type of counseling for their marijuana or drug use. So there's nothing that comes out of it. So it's a serious problem for us. And law enforcement is talking about it with the legislature for a year now, trying to come up with a baseline threshold.
And that still hasn't happened.
It still has not happened.
And research shows that teenagers are drinking and smoking marijuana, often doing both of them. And maybe Catherine can elaborate more, but in regard to driving, the significant impairment that, you know, young people will have if they don't really understand the effects of one or the other, but the mixing of the two becomes very, very dangerous if a young person's behind the wheel of a car.
Yeah.
You know, and Catherine mentioned in the beginning about the I'm going to use the term gateway drug because I'm a layman, but I know people say that that's not true, or the naysayers on the other side of us say that's not true. I think there is a connection between, you know, marijuana and then going forward to something more risky, let's say. Do you see that in your?
We do, and actually there's good, hard, solid data out of Colorado that says that. They've seen the uptick. by 100%. It's a big number. They've seen it double, and those are real numbers because Colorado has been tracking this from day one. So it's just not a police officer or somebody else talking about it. It's a real deal, and that's coming, soon to be, in a neighborhood near you, and that's the life we're living. The voters voted to legalize marijuana and to legalize the sale of marijuana, and with definition, but with it comes a whole plethora of
Right.
problems for us.
Well, the other thing I want to mention too is that people assume, you can't really get addicted to marijuana, and that's not true. And actually, if you look at any of the recovery centers for teenagers, over 70%, so it's usually around 70 to 75% of individuals, youth that are in there for marijuana use, and a lot of times people think it's a lot heavier drugs. And if people don't get treatment earlier, a lot of times they will move on to the harder drugs. And so that's what we're hearing. So we want to try to get young people that do become addicted to marijuana into those treatment facilities earlier.
Right, and then to piggyback on that, young people, they've shown links between the use of marijuana and anxiety and depression, suicidal ideation. There's some clear links in the data and the research, and certainly as someone who was with high school students for 28 years of my career, I can say anecdotally, you can see those links as well. The kids getting, that's right, that addiction.
You feel anxious,
that's right.
This is something that can kind of calm your nerves, and then it starts to become something that you depend on.
That's right.
And there's also data out of Washington State as well as Colorado that has shown that there are now THC babies being born, much like the crack baby that we knew in the 1980s as a result of excessive use by more so a young mother-to-be. So that's a whole different dimension that we have to deal with.
And it seems to me that we as a community, and I know that we talk about this in the budget process, have really tried to put as much as we can into protecting our citizens and our guests and making sure that they aren't, killing themselves from opiates. And we talk about Narcan, and we talk about this whole drug corridor and what's going on, and how many people have actually passed away because of this. Why would we want to put something that moves that further along is beyond me.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I don't quite understand that.
Well, and a lot of times what effective substance abuse prevention looks like in a community is what a community looks like. It's what people see. And so if you see a lot of liquor stores, and if you see, it changes the protective factors of that community. And that's kind of what you're setting up. You're setting up a protective, positive community. And if we see a lot of liquor store density correlates with alcohol use and other negative impacts. So you want to kind of really look at your environment, and that environment does impact. Set up security cameras, you're going to be safer. Set up signage laws, you're going to be safer. So there's a lot of direct evidence to the physical environment directly impacting the community's behaviors.
Yeah. I got to say that I'm lucky enough in the Mass Municipal Association to kind of see some of these presentations as they're coming along. And I have to say that the lobbyists, and I can't think of any other word, the lobbyists for this law, the pro-marijuana lobby, had to be one of the most disgusting presentation I've ever seen in my life about how great this was for the community, how great it was for communities making money and what have you. And I've run the numbers on the taxes. They're talking about you can get a 2% local tax. That's nothing. We will spend way more than that in law enforcement, in substance abuse programs, in more incidents in the schools, not to mention what's happening to society. So that was a horrible, horrible part of that too. And also, this is some of the worst drafted legislation I've ever seen. It really is incredible. And we've talked about this together. There is going to be a Cannabis Control Commission that is going to be appointed by the treasurer. Not that that's a bad thing, state treasurer. They have now the legislature's trying to pull that away. That's not even settled yet. It's crazy. There is going to be a 15-member cannabis advisory board, and in the law, 9 of them are directly related to the marijuana industry. It's like putting the fox in the hen house is exactly what they're doing.
Those big tobacco days.
Yeah, it's exactly that. It's exactly that. And the state tax is 3.75% in the law. Nothing.
Yeah, and that's not
That's
near where it is in Colorado.
Yeah, what was Colorado? Was that like
I think Colorado's a minimum of 11,
Yeah.
and there's
Right.
another surtax on top. It's like an
5%
excise
on-
tax.
Yeah.
And I think Washington State is somewhere up around 15%. And there's still not, it's still not enough to offset the rehabs that they need,
Right.
the
Exactly.
issues that law enforcement need, the issues in the schools and the communities that are focused on you know, on the children, on the people in the community, on the needs of those people. The 15% doesn't even come close to what they need. So what was it, 3.75%?
3.75 for the state.
For the state.
Won't-
Right.
that-
We still have yet to been able to iron out medical marijuana,
Right.
and we've had it for 3 years.
Right.
So, I mean, it's a long process, and the legislature already has realized the
and they've already
problems with
changed it. And here's what we're doing here. We're going to try to do to stop it at the door right now, at least in our community. I think that is a great line. It is a reflection of our community, what we do. Board of Selectmen have put on the April town election question number 1, and what that question number 1 says is it authorizes town meeting to ban this recreational marijuana shop in Wakefield, or a commercial marijuana shop in Wakefield via zoning, and we have an article for that, and in our general bylaw, kind of do a belt and suspenders sort of things by that. What I'm heartened by is that the town of Wakefield actually voted against recreational marijuana in the state election in November, or the federal election in November, by 53 to 47. So I am heartened by that. I was kind of surprised that number was so high on the other side. But we did reverse the trend of the state. So we are going to ask people to vote yes on that. The selectmen are very adamant and have that on the ballot. And then go to town meeting. But number 2, what we've done as a community over the last few years, and really 3 of you here, so much involved in it, the Wake Up Wakefield group, the Substance Abuse Coalition, the youth action teams that we're working with, the older people that are coming in that have suffered either themselves from some drug abuse or have family members that are volunteering to help their time. They stop me every day. What your police officers are going through when they go and meet someone. Why we'd want to allow this in is beyond me. And I tell you they're coming. I'm getting calls in my office. You know, where is Wakefield on the marijuana question? I'd like to go into, open up
We're
a
at a
shop
great
here.
location.
Yeah. What location? What did you call our location, Chief? When you presented the selectmen about the corridor?
Oh, we're
Drug-
right on the I-95 corridor. I mean, it's a pipeline. But you know, see, to go into what you said, we are doing the right thing, and I think we should continue to march in that
Right.
direction. Catherine and I had the good fortune to go to New York last week. NYPD put on a opiate awareness, for lack of a better term. At the end of the day, at 4 o'clock, they put a slide up, and it had 10 points on the slide on what you should do to bring your community in line with drug restriction, reduction, how to keep your programs going. And I think Catherine will agree with me. If we didn't hit all 10, in Wakefield, we hit 9 of them. And you know, that inspired us that we are doing, the community, everybody is doing the right thing. The school department, Wake Up, the legislative body in town here, the police department, fire department, EMS, we're all doing the right thing here. So I think we're marching down the right road, and I think the community, to use your word, should be heartened by the fact that we have a good grip on this, and we're steering in the right direction. And we've found that the way we do things here is for the benefit of the community, for our children, and for our residents. So I'm very happy with that. Where
I
we
am
stand.
too. I'm very proud to be part of it, frankly.
And we just had Reading next door
Yeah.
voted.
Yeah, Reading voted in there. They're doing the same path that we are. Their town meeting, their election is a little bit earlier than ours. They voted by an overwhelming margin, 70-30, to go forward to town meeting and to zone out these shops in their community. So I always like to beat Reading. So let's have a bigger margin. So I would say that as we close up here, please, if you have any questions, I think you can contact any of us or my board members. We'd be certainly happy to talk to you as well. Vote yes on question number 1 on the ballot, because we want to say no to this in Wakefield and keep marching where we were, as you just said. Any other comments, anybody? No? Great. Thank you very much. Thank you.